The Gitrog Monster is not just a frog, it's a horror that defies explanation, a weight pressing down on the imagination. From the dark depths of Lake Zhava in the highlands of Thalia, the creature lurks, waiting. The lake itself, like everything on Innistrad, is not just a lake, but a living thing, reflecting the madness that seeps into every crevice of the land. Its waters, cold and unforgiving, ripple with the whispers of those lost beneath its surface. Somewhere in those waters, the Gitrog Monster makes its home, a creature so massive it stretches the boundaries of belief. The villagers know it as more than just a myth. The stories have lived longer than most of them. It is said the lake is cursed, that nothing good comes from the water. The people live near it, but never close, not unless they want to end up like the sheep they send out, hoping to buy themselves more time. And so the cycle begins, first the sheep, then the bodies. At some point it always escalates. The lake demands more, and the villagers comply. Always there's fear, an unspoken agreement that this will not end until the monster itself is satiated. But even the stories don't capture the full terror of it. The Gitrog Monster is not just a creature of hunger, it is something else, something that bends the mind, that twists reality. The eyes are what do it, they say. You don't look into them, because once you do, you're not yourself anymore. There are tales of people wandering into the lake, eyes blank, as though under a spell. Some return, though not as themselves. And the ones who do come back often don't last long. One girl, she was young, maybe 15, looked into the Gitrog Monster's eyes and found herself doing the unthinkable. She killed her best friend that night, not out of rage, but because something deep in her told her to. The monster doesn't need to touch you to control you. But the creature was never just a mindless horror. The villagers turned it into something more, a god, a thing to be worshipped. They fed it, yes, but they also prayed to it. The line between fear and reverence blurred. The Gitrog Monster, bloated and engorged with sacrifices, grew complacent. It no longer needed to hunt. Its meals were brought to it like offerings. The cult around the monster flourished. For years it thrived, an entire community built around a giant frog that devoured everything offered to it. Then came the Phyrexians. The day the machines arrived was a day like any other. The lake was still, the cultists quiet in their worship. But then the water shifted. Something had disturbed it. At first the villagers thought it might be an omen from their god, but soon they realized it was not something holy. Machines, strange metallic invaders, had come to Innistrad, and the lake was no longer safe. The Gitrog Monster, used to easy meals and blind worship, found itself face to face with something it didn't understand. The Phyrexians were unlike anything it had ever tasted, their strange bodies unpalatable, their presence a violation of its territory. The monster's hunger turned to rage. For the first time in ages, it left the lake. Its movements were slow but unstoppable, a mountain of flesh heaving itself from the water. The cultists scattered, unsure what this meant for them. Had their god turned on them? The Gitrog Monster didn't care. It had no loyalty to them. Its only instinct was to survive, to move on from the place that had once been its sanctuary. It wasn't long before it reached Thraben. The once grand city had become a battlefield, Phyrexians swarming its streets, their cold metallic bodies tearing through flesh and stone alike. Among the ruins stood Thalia, the last of her Cathar squad, alone, her sword raised in defiance. She was moments away from being overwhelmed when the Gitrog Monster arrived. It barreled through the Phyrexians, its powerful tongue lashing out, crushing and devouring as it went. Thalia didn't understand why it had come, but there was no time to question. She saw an opportunity in the chaos. The Gitrog Monster, towering over her, paused for a moment. There was a strange intelligence in its eyes. It knelt if such a massive thing could kneel, and Thalia, with no other choice, climbed onto its back. Together, they carved a path through the Phyrexian horde, Thalia's blade and the Gitrog's hunger working in sync. The battlefield was theirs, but there was always a price. Thalia could feel it, deep in her bones. The Gitrog Monster wasn't a savior. It was a predator. She wasn't its ally, just another pawn, another potential meal. As long as there were Phyrexians to feed it, she was safe. But once the invaders were gone, what would stop it from turning on her? And yet she rode on, knowing full well the precariousness of her situation. The monster had no destination in mind. It wandered, heedless of Thalia's desires or plans. It moved with a single purpose: to consume. And as they pressed forward, deeper into the chaos of the invasion, Thalia kept one hand on her sword, always ready, always prepared for when the moment came that she would need to defend herself, not from the Phyrexians, but from the very thing that had saved her. But the Gitrog Monster's journey didn't end there. Its path eventually led it far beyond Innistrad, through an omen path that twisted through realities. It found itself on Thunder Junction, a strange, unfamiliar place. The inhabitants of this plane, curious and reckless, tried to tame the beast. They wanted to ride it, to use its massive strength for their own gain. But the Gitrog Monster would not be tamed. It was chaos incarnate, a force of nature that answered to no one. The people of Thunder Junction could try all they wanted, but they would never control the beast. It had no master, no god. It simply existed to devour, to survive, and to destroy anything in its path.